Hello, Sarah Campos. I'm going to be going through doing a little something a little bit different today. You may have gotten this link, and you may not even known that I even had a YouTube page at all. And trust me, it's not a lot. It's mainly just me doing videos of gaming nerd shit. So this is a little bit of a different thing. I'm going to be kind of hoping to kind of take some time here to, I don't know, do something a little more creative. At least when it comes to my own sort of personal creations. A lot of people don't know, but I do a little bit of short fiction writing my free time, along with having a day job and all that other crap. Um, it's kind of a long process for me. I'm a fairly slow writer and even slower editor at times, so it could take a while for me to produce some things. I actually just got finished. Kind of my, I don't know, I guess at this point it'd be the fourth or fifth draft of a story at this point, and I'm already about to go through that rather laborious process of having to get someone to pay a freelance editor to look it over and do some final touch-ups on it before I start sending it out to get a bunch of rejections. Thus is the thus is the way of this shit. My hope one day is that I can at least accumulate maybe a series of different of these short stories, particularly ones that are based around my time in Chicago, and hopefully maybe release it as like a little try to get it maybe published as one big bundle. I tend to write a lot of what they would call novelettes, which is basically just like it's like in between like a short story and novella, about 1,500 words, I would say. So it's typically kind of the size that I go. I go anywhere between about 30 to 50 pages. So not short, and this could definitely be a big pain in my ass in terms of like trying to find places to submit stuff, whereas a lot of things kind of need to be in that 8,000 word range, and I just don't know how to write short a lot of times. I don't know what it is about me. I tend to expound a lot, as you will probably hear. So going through this process a little bit, it's been a fun creative experience, but it is difficult to get stuff out there adequately. I'm sure I could just kind of create a website or something of the like, and maybe get it done. But it's I don't know. Trying to do it the traditional way of getting things done in literary magazines can really be a real pain. And ultimately, as I've come to realize, having given my work to some people to read and stuff like that, and I kind of realized about myself too. Man, we don't read that much anymore. As a society, it's just very hard for all of us to sit down. I totally get it. You come home from work, I work out, play video games, do some writing. Like, it's really hard to fit in that, I don't know, what would be like an hour, 30 minutes at least of doing some reading. Like, it's kind of hard. A lot of times what I do to kind of get myself in the writing mood, if you will, be to kind of listen to an audiobook. So big Audible fan, actually. Even though I don't actually like Audible as an app, I think it's kind of shitty. But you know, they're the main boo in town, so I definitely use them a lot, and that's usually the way in which I'll do some chores or whatever, walk around the house, and it's like I listen to a podcast or something. It's really a kind of a great way to kind of get my mind in the right space. So I figured I might try to do something very similar with one of my short stories, and maybe potentially you guys can see what it is I've been working on. This is probably one of my favorite stories I've written in a while. This one was done, I want to say, at the end of 2021, beginning of, I think I got finished with all of it by the beginning of 2022. Started sending it out for submissions. Um, this was written in large part during the year 2020, during basically the doldrums of fucking the quarantine at the time. I was moved into a new spot in the middle of quarantine with my girlfriend, and it was a very crazy experience just to go through. Not crazy, but just I don't know. There's a lot going on in my mind, and I think it kind of comes up a lot in the story as well. I think with all my stories, they're fiction, but they are kind of based in large part about personal experiences, people, places, things I've seen, stories I've heard people tell. Like, a lot of it really does come from a very tangible reality that exists. There are some major distinctions, though. I think it is fair to say that whenever I look at these stories and go through them, this is not me and my girlfriend actually experiencing what actually happened. Parts of this story are true, big parts of it are definitely not. So I think it's worth always keeping that in mind. I'm not outing anybody for anything in particular here. There's a lot of major details that are different, but I want to go through it. I'd like to be able to do a nice, solid reading of it from beginning to end, and you have to just bear with me for a minute here. So let's begin. Let's get started. This is Broken Play. October 31st, 2020. Weary eyes gaze through a second-story window looking over Damon Avenue. Months into quarantine, the joyous why-nots of Halloween had soured into a why-bother sentimentality. A few fun-sized Captain Americas and Elsas walked with parents in face masks. They passed gated homes, lit, decorated, but not open. A bowl of candy placed on a folding chair displayed a shrine with offerings not to the dead, but to those no longer living. The undead nabbed at the candy-wrapped remnants of normalcy before quickly lathering another glob of sanitizer between their palms. It had become normal to watch holidays pass like masked strangers from one's window. Through the glass stood a 31-year-old woman named Socorro, wearing nothing but denim overalls. Dangling on a hook near the entrance was the same somber, massless mug on a laminated tag with Cora printed on it. Though quietly lamenting her shortened moniker, she offered it as a casual comfort to friends and colleagues. The name tag came from Northwestern Memorial Hospital, where she worked as a patient escort. It was 5:30, and soon she would be there, working the night shift. Turning from the window, Cora stood in the dining room of her Chicago flat. At the center of the dinner table was a black, spider-themed crochet cloth. On it was a plastic jack-o'-lantern filled with sweet holiday favorites. Set face down at her end of the table was a coffee mug printed with a cartoon ghost wearing a traditional Red Cross nursing cap and holding a syringe. The printed phrase, "trick or treatment," contained all the punny punch one could stand. It surmised exactly how she felt about this Halloween. One painfully bad joke. Things were not as they were. This was never more evident to Cora than when she moved in with her boyfriend, her panzón, Edmund. He wasn't a bad living partner, as boys go. She had certainly dealt with worse. He wasn't a good cook, super handy with tools, or exceptionally clean, but he did insist on doing dishes. He did them so frequently that he would often overstuff the drying rack and had rested the trick-or-treatment mug on the edge of the counter. Waking long after her panzón left for work, she entered the kitchen to find it on the tiled floor, clean, dried, and broken. Drying atop a paper towel, a glob of Gorilla Glue bonded the mug's handle back on. Taking a seat, she pulled the plastic jack-o'-lantern towards her and propped her phone sideways against it. Unbuttoning her overalls, she observed herself to the selfie camera display, adjusting her posture and position. The image reminded her of Jesus in the Last Supper. In the weeks of October, Cora had wanted to carve a real jack-o'-lantern. They talked of grabbing a pumpkin many times. Edmund would invariably forget, and Cora never felt inspired to do it herself. Instead, she settled for this plastic, lifeless substitute. But she had always carved one before. She loved the hues of a fall harvest. It harkened back to a time growing up when she wanted to be a farmer, even when the very thought gave her mother a migraine. She left that dream behind her with her childhood, but still romanticized imbuing healthy life into the world rather than moving about the sick and dying while nurses sat on their asses watching her do their job. Still, she was essential, and that was a serious thing to consider in these times. Things were not as they were. The mortal shadow of COVID permeated over the realities of recession and rampant joblessness. While Cora compiled overtime hours, her panzón was laid off early in the lockdown. Money was tight, and Cora looked to more rousing ventures to make money than growing cabbage or taking blood samples. Cora's first reference to OnlyFans came from a middle-aged white woman known as Crazy Brittany. They started at Northwestern Memorial Hospital around the same time, becoming happenstance acquaintances. Crazy Brittany had worked as a bartender before opting for the chance at PTO and maybe some proper health insurance. She was deemed crazy for her inclination to speak rapidly without enough sane thoughts to permeate her words. She introduced herself to Cora by commenting on her cute eyebrows and feet. She thought Cora could make real money with an OnlyFans page. She herself garnered over a dozen $5.99 monthly subscriptions by posting weekly shots of her notably bloated breasts nuzzled around various poles, signposts, and the like. There were uncanny similarities between OnlyFans and the common social media platforms Cora avoided like the virus. It bore the same slew of ostentatious souls whose provocative posts compiled like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. She created a page under the username NurseSocorro3, and in her description stated that she just needed weed money. Going in, Cora managed her OnlyFans as a gag to herself. She started a subscription for $3.50, a half-cocked price no one would pay just to see her. But after a week or so of posting selfies with the faintest signs of thirst, she was being followed. And the more that followed, subscribing and leaving tips along the way, the more she played along without really knowing why. To the followers of Nurse Socorro 3 came the postings of a career woman too tired to leave her home, posing provocatively in outfits worn when things were different. They were peeps into a person seen occasionally at a 4 a.m. bar after a brutal shift, when the only thing that had kept them going were the heels in her work bag and a moment to stop caring. It's what Cora used to do before moving in with her bonson, to whom she relayed nothing about this page. At 10:30 a.m., another post from Nurse Socorro 3 appeared. A picture of Cora gluing the trick-or-treatment mug back together. The caption of the photo read, "My favorite holiday is being held together with glue. But I'm still up to my old tricks. How about I knock on your door for some treats? Maybe you can see my costume. We'll send topless pic for $20. She felt it important to start the day with low expectations. Anything else would be a happy surprise. The Gorilla Glue dried while Cora washed up, drank coffee, and made breakfast. She prepared a list of to-dos, which included paying bills, renewing her antidepressant prescription, house cleaning, and preparing dinner. She went back to her OnlyFans page to find that someone had, in fact, tipped her $20. The generous follower went by the username LightningKicks55. The profile was of a hand making a peace sign, and neither the email nor the bio offered any personal insight into the follower. Cora knew LightningKicks55 as one of her earliest patrons. As to who this follower might be, Cora never asked. The money was paid, and the promise would be kept. This one was for LightningKicks55. Touching the camera's capture button, the timer initiated, counting down from 10. Holding the trick-or-treatment mug to her mouth, she took a dramatic swig, her eyes carefully made soft and satisfied. The motion of the cup directed one's eyes down to her bare breast. The only visible clothing worn was a vintage nurse's cap pulled from a Halloween costume set. The photo caption read, "Anyone who says I don't earn my money is on some bullshit. While your nurse is busting ass in the ICU, be sure to wear your mask and stay scary. Send another $30 tonight, and I'll wear as much or as little of this costume as you wish." The sliding door of the bedroom closet opened. Hanging separately from Cora's dresses were her freshly washed work scrubs. Hesitating, Cora motioned as though she were looking for something else. Being on the front lines of an essential workforce carried many assurances, a steady pay to go along with a steady flow of overtime steadily grounding down one's will. In a time when so many were left needy, she was tired of being needed. Cora finally took the hanger before noticing a black trash bag lying on the floor. Inside was the full costume set, a slinky white getup, white fishnets, and a red plastic stethoscope. She snatched the vintage nurse's cap from her head, tossed it with the rest, shut the door, and got dressed. It felt bitterly different when Cora ordered that costume off of Amazon. In Halloween's past, she loved perusing the local thrift stores, occult shops, and all manner of costume vendors in search of her next look. Some costumes perfectly enhanced the licentious form of her sensuality. Others made her look obscene, grotesque, and appalling. But they all brought that gleeful pleasure of having been seen as something different by strangers, friends, and even her bonson, who never dressed up. On the eve of Halloween, she'd fawn over herself in the mirror, looking exactly as she wanted. But staring at herself now, wearing her nurse's smocks. She looked too much like herself. Cora stepped out of her apartment and surveyed the empty streets from the porch. The house was clean, the rooms organized, the bathroom and kitchen were wiped, swept, and mopped. The bongs, bowls, and pipes were soaked in confiza and thoroughly rid of their grime. A six-pack of Wiener Le Tub cooled in the fridge, and dinner was kept warm inside the oven. Some errands remained undone. She never made it to the pharmacy and had neglected to leave her November's rent check under the landlord's door. All of this for another day, for soon Cora's pension would be returning home. A 3-foot-tall Wonder Woman in blonde hair came into view from the sidewalk, holding a mother's hand. Cora observed their synchronized motion, taking a cigarette drag and keeping the contents of her free hand clenched inside her palm. Hidden away in the spice cabinet was an orange Walgreens prescription bottle marked with Cora's full name and home address. The prescription was for D-amphetamine Adderall salt tablets. The bottle gave specific instructions to take 1 tablet by mouth every morning. Cora's hand opened, revealing 3 20-milligram peach-colored pills marked with B973 on one side and a 20 on the other. Popping them into her mouth, she allowed herself a moment. The 3-foot-tall Wonder Woman had fallen out of sight, but not out of mind. Cora bore no memory of her first Halloween. The earliest photo found was of her infant self sleeping, dressed as a baby calf or maybe a veal burger to be. She was 9 years old the first time she picked her own costume. She dressed as Jack Pumpkinhead from the wickedly deranged sequel Return to Oz, her favorite movie. She could barely stand straight with the pumpkin on her head and had to destroy one of her father's flannels to do it. But for her first go, it was exactly how she wanted. That was the year Cora's mother put her on Adderall. In Cora's mind, she was the quintessential needy, wanty bitch with the zest of a second-generation immigrant mentality that simultaneously stayed stuck in the old mindsets while bullishly charging forward for their decidedly ungrateful heirs. Cora's failing grades were seen as nothing more than disrespect for what her mother had done for her. The Adderall was just one more unspared expense that she was all too willing to endure for struggle's sake. All she wanted from Cora was to be grateful and obedient. Take off the pumpkin, take the pill, and do as you should. Ike? Ike? Stubbing her cigarette, Cora studied the patch of fresh soil placed just below the balcony. She looked at the time on her phone and gazed out again at the empty street, scanning one way and then the other. Near the front door was a tote bag crammed with basic tools and gardening equipment. The screen door slammed behind her as she stepped down from the balcony, bag in hand, surveying a still empty garden bed. Hearing the faint sounds of movement, Cora caught sight of Edmund, her bonson, pacing down the sidewalk, wearing one of her surgical masks. Cradled over his right shoulder was a rectangular box that looked like a makeshift coffin for a family pet. The metal fence reverberated as Edmund closed the gate behind them. Cora stood atop the stairs, bearing a warm smile of greeting. Though they had been apart all day, neither had thought much of the other. There was love there, but neither felt especially missed. It was like they had run into each other by happenstance, forced to play along for as long as they would. "Trick or treat," Edmund said. "And what are you supposed to be?" "That's the laziest Amazon man costume I've ever seen." "May as well have been a hobo," Cora said. "And this isn't much of a haunted house. No skeletons, bats, not even any of those rubber spiders thrown in the bushes." "It's much scarier inside, I think. I got a few skeletons in the closet for you." "Well, I hope there's candy. Not much out here but some warm cigarette butts." Cora's smile faded. "You know I'm trying to quit." "Then I'm flattered you came out here just to greet me." "The air is so nice and windy. It'll be dark soon with all this gloom. A perfect day for Halloween." Edmund climbed the steps, closing the intimate space between them. "Is it so perfect?" No, it's not. They swayed close to one another for a moment. She could feel the top of her forehead brushing against the surgical mask, and for a moment failed to recognize the person underneath it. What are you supposed to be? Edmund asked. Oh, just a patient escort. It's what I do. Just take people along, wherever they need to go. She caressed the cradled cardboard in his arms. Is that something for me? It's for us. Designed for two, for me and my boo. A bit of nostalgia from better days. He cradled the box in his arms, showing excited reverence. This here made my childhood. It says it's made in China. Edmund grew up 20 miles north of Chicago City proper in the west end of Evanston. While landing a job in the offices of Goose Island Brewery, he moved to the city, finding a cheap roommate situation in the Ukrainian village. It was in the neighborhood, perusing through Adam and Son and Daughter Gardens to buy his mother flowers, where he first met Cora. Cora's first impression of Edmund was that he was a dork with an attitude and looked cute in a mustache. They talked a bit about plants, looked at a few together, bought nothing, and made plans to meet the next night. Just plans, nothing more. They weren't there to date as much as play games with each other. It's what Edmund wanted, and it's what Cora wanted too, though playtime did not end as she'd expected. She'd expected to fuck, to have him play, but not stay, though it did not go that way. On the corner of Western and Fullerton Avenue was a bar marked with a long, lanky sign that read Logan Hardware. This was the Logan Arcade, which boasted the best maintained and largest public collection of pinball and video games in the city. It was the first week of October, and inside, near the entrance, was an animatronic band composed of a dog trio dressed as skeletons. They jerked around lifelessly, arms and mouths convulsing about to misfit tracks. It was a jarring visual, but one that broke the awkward tension when Cora and Edmund reunited. The couple ordered drinks, made small talk, which gradually devolved into talking about their jobs and being tired. Nothing felt easy to say, and it was hard to hear. What was audible brought on the same questions that annoyed Cora so. How was your day? You having fun? We are, aren't we? The lost chatter, searching for sense, had finally dissipated. Eventually, Cora retreated to the bathroom to snort a bump of cocaine, using the plunger tubing of a tampon. While gone, Edmund abandoned their table, treading away from the front bar toward the arcade space. The glow from the arcade cabinets illuminated the interior's dim lighting, producing a blue-tinted gleam against the walls. The sounds were frenetic and repetitive, chiming in loops like a hip-hop beat. There was a juxtaposition in movement from those pushing through the crowds looking lost and overstimulated as they tried not to spill their beer, and those standing transfixed in front of arcade cabinets. Observing the scene, something caught Edmund's eye. It was an arcade cabinet for Super Street Fighter II Turbo. It was said that the original Street Fighter II birthed the modern fighting game, and its original release beckoned a new wave of mass popularity in arcades. With each new iteration came improvements both graphically and mechanically, new characters, and amusingly more adjectives and subtitles to go with the name. The Super Turbo iteration of this game was widely appraised as the quintessential fighting experience. The intro opened with an image of Ryu, the game's lead protagonist, shifting his weight into a fighting stance, while shots of Akuma, the game's most powerful and mysterious antagonist, flashed on screen. Ryu then launched his trademark Hadouken energy projectile, and the screen went white. Then the startup screen title appeared. Super Street Fighter II Turbo. From his coat pocket, Edmund removed a crumpled plastic bag of quarters, inserting 2 credits and hitting the Player 1 button. The game went to the character select screen. There, he selected Chun-Li, an icon of the series and one of fighting game's first playable female characters. A native of China, Chun-Li was identified by her Q-po dress, her double bun hairstyle, and muscular legs corresponding with her kick-heavy fighting style. With no player 2, the game went into its classic arcade mode, a gauntlet of one-on-one matches the player must win to face the game's end boss. For the first match, Chun-Li faced Dalsum, an Indian yoga master recognized for his ability to stretch limbs and breathe fire projectiles. The match took place in the Maharaja's palace. At center stage was a large image of Ganesha, an elephant-headed Hindu god. The stage emitted vibrant hues of greens and yellows, and the game's soundtrack played an upbeat sitar tune rendered in digital bleeps and boops. The fighters faced each other center stage, Chun-Li on the left and Dalsum on the right. All matches were fought in rounds, with the winner beating their opponent in a 2 out of 3 rounds contest. The match commenced with a cue of words appearing on the screen. Round 1. Fight! Edmund rapidly tapped the kicking buttons as Chun-Li performed her signature lightning kick move. She lifted her lead leg to launch a barrage of straight kicks, but she was still too far away to land as Dalsum stayed back, waited for an opening, and launched both fists forward with stretched arms. They landed perfectly, sending Chun-Li careening backwards. Edmund's posture stiffened. The round continued in much the same way. Edmund's inputs and reactions were slow and imprecise. He dealt only enough damage to drain a quarter of Dalsum's health bar before Chun-Li dropped to the floor in defeat. Edmund's brow furrowed as air gusted from his nostrils. It had been too long since he'd played, but he did not miss this. He was being thoroughly handled by personal weakness and impersonal circumstances. It would have always beaten him in the end, he knew that, but the match was not over. Round 2. Fight! Edmund became aggressive, intent on closing the distance and getting inside his opponent's long limbs. No more games, no more attempts to be the smarter, technical fighter when he wasn't. The plan seemed to work, as Chun-Li took Dalsum into a corner and dealt half a life bar's worth of damage. But it did not seal the deal. Dalsum jumped to the opposing side and once again capitalized on numerous openings. The round was dead even at a quarter life bar as Cora approached Edmund from behind, brushing her chin against his shoulder. He could feel his focus breaking as Chun-Li jumped towards Dalsum. "Which one are you?" Cora asked. Dalsum leaned back, his belly protruding with a massive inhale. Out came his yoga flame, a heavy barrier of fire that perfectly countered Chun-Li's aerial approach, sending her back in an inferno. "The one on fire," Edmund said. Defeat felt imminent. Dalsum crouched, then slid forward with a kick just short. He was sent back with a heavy kick by Chun-Li, and as he tried the same approach again, Edmund saw it coming. Once again, he hit the kick buttons in rapid succession and caught his opponent with his lightning kicks. The round was his. Edmund and Cora celebrated, but still, it was not over. Round 3. Fight! Cora turned her eyes away from the screen, observing Edmund's grim focus. He was handsome, but nothing about what he was going through made that apparent. He looked flustered and exposed, like a villain being unmasked in a Scooby-Doo cartoon. He wasn't so much doing something, but rather being done to, like he was being tortured. Why do this? You're having fun, aren't you? Cora certainly wasn't. The plastic bag caught her attention, and for a second, she mistook it for drugs before inserting 2 credits of her own into the arcade cabinet. Dalsum proceeded to grab Chun-Li by the head, punching her a few times and throwing her halfway across the screen. Seconds had gone by and Edmund's health bar was half empty. The gradual handling of the controls, defenses, moves, and even basic combos left him. Trying to gather himself, there seemed to be nothing he could do to stem the inevitable. Then Cora's hand hit the Player 2 button and the match was stopped. "Here comes a new challenger." Edmund stood dazed for a moment as if breaking from a trance. The game returned to the character select screen, allowing Cora to peruse frivolously through the fighter portraits. She selected E. Honda, a Japanese sumo wrestler. He appeared stout and muscular, wearing his classic blue and white striped mawashi to complement his chonmagi ponytail and red face paint. "Oh, Panson," Cora exclaimed warmly. "I'm a bit of a chubby chaser. I hope you don't mind me saying so." Edmund shook his head, selecting Chun-Li again. "Wait, what?" "Round 1. Fight!" The match devolved into a button mashing, with Edmund repeatedly tapping the kick inputs to perform Chun-Li's lightning kicks, and Korra tapping the punch inputs to perform E Honda's similar 100-hand slaps. Though it lacked the technique and strategy of a real contest, it bore a joy more genuine than any competitive consequence. The gleam of the arcade screen illuminated their grinned expressions as they traded playful banter and inaudible exclamations. No sense in playing good. No sense in playing nice. No sense in thinking of those you beat and those that beat you. Play like this was senseless where it mattered. In the end, none of it mattered. And it was fun. Korra lifted her hand from the arcade stick. "Well, game over," she said, grasping Edmund's arm. "You're still playing?" "Game is not over. I still have my 2 credits. Why fuss over something you can't have back? I just want to win off this thing." "You did win. You beat me." The game returned to arcade mode. In a small plane, the player traversed the globe to the jungles of Brazil. There, Edmund faced Blanca, a bizarro man-beast hybrid of unknown origin, bearing the stance, movement, and howl of an ape. With green skin, he wore tattered shorts whose orange color matched his wild mane and chest hair. Blanca's moves were erratic and fierce, jumping all around, remaining still only long enough to land a heavy swipe. When Chun-Li kept her distance, he'd launched himself at her like a cannonball. When she got close, he emitted a massive jolt of electricity from his body, sending her flying back. Before long, Edmund was beaten. And then again, and again, and again. Soon, the plastic bag was empty. As defeat settled in, he remained bitterly still. While the victors advanced to the next triumph, the hapless losers were left staring at a continuous screen, watching it count down from 10, 3, 2, 1. Game over. The screen went dark, and in the reflection, Edmund stood alone. Korra was gone. Korra followed her Ponson into the house with anxious haste as he made an oblivious bolt to his office in the second bedroom. He set the box on his desk and finally removed his mask. Using the sharper edges of his nails, he cut open the packing tape. Inside, a protective foam shell encased the device, of which he promptly removed and tossed aside. As Korra pushed open the door, pieces of cardboard, foam, and tape were strewn about on the wooden floor. She picked up a bit of paper, the instruction manual for a device dubbed the Pandora Box Retro Arcade 11. It was a gaming console designed by a 3A game, containing a vast collection of retro arcade titles. Placed on the desk was a rectangular casing made of plastic the width and length of a keyboard. The casing's depth contained the device's internal hardware, topped with a longer, wider plastic paneling which housed the controls. There was a pair of red ball-top joysticks, along with a pair of 6-button layouts hued in white. Each player also had a blue pause and player button. "What a beaut," Edmund said, gnawing at a plastic bag of wires. "What are you trying to play?" "Everything I've wanted. It's got it all. Mortal Kombat, Fatal Fury, King of Fighters." "It looks like a Pac-Man machine." "It's got that too. All the games I've wanted to play, how I've wanted to play them. With a good old joystick." "But what about your other joystick thingy?" In the corner of Edmund's cluttered space, a hoary RAP Pro 5 arcade stick collected dust. Bearing a similar arcade design, it was a single-player controller designed for various gaming consoles. Korra had given it as a birthday gift, requested specifically by her Ponson. Indeed, this was not Edmund's first foray into gaming, though Korra knew little about it initially. While their first outing proved an eerie sign of things to come, Edmund did little playing once they became exclusive. Back then, he was a broke transplant without so much as a PlayStation 3 to his name. He referenced gaming culture and reminisced on childhood arcades, but nothing more tangible than a bit of nostalgia. But a real passion did stir in Korra's Ponson, one that arose after they moved in together. By then, he'd gained a higher position at Goose Island and came upon a group of coworkers gaming competitively off hours, mainly fighting games. Edmund then spent an entire Christmas bonus on a Nintendo Switch console, as well as games like Samurai Showdown, Mortal Kombat 11, DBZ Fighters, and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Cora would return from the hospital to a dark void of a home, with only a TV's gleam emanating from her pension's office. She'd given up disturbing his play, content to decompress alone with a quarter bottle of white wine curled up next to the bedside lamp. They used to spend the day's end together, venting, listening, before finding themselves sifting through the bed for the other's touch. She had lost her playmate, and grew tired of games. She could tell him to stop, but why? Why must he keep playing? No sense in disturbing him with those questions. No sense and no questions allowed the day to go easy. Easy come and easy go, alone. You gave me what I wanted, but I just wanted something else, Edmund said, gently caressing the joystick's plastic like a piece of Corinthian leather. It's supposed to come with a Hayabusa stick and buttons. I prefer Sanwa, but these will do just fine. This bit of Ponson gibberish came to Cora like the incomprehensible musings of an audiobook, replaying the same chapter over and over. When he first bought the Nintendo Switch, he opted to use the separate-handed Joy-Con controllers that came with the console. This novelty quickly grew stale as Edmund became convinced of their unresponsive nature. He then bought a Nintendo Switch Pro controller, a traditional design used for competitive play. After that, he bought a silicone textured casing to give the controller extra grip. He bought cap-sized grips for the joysticks themselves. When that did not satisfy, he yearned for the classic inputs of arcade controls, and Cora obliged with a hoary RAP Pro 5 arcade stick, hoping it would satisfy. He then replaced the stick itself, and then the buttons with premium brands from Japan and South Korea. He switched the stick's traditional ball top for a lesser-used bat top. Then he switched back. He modified the joystick's length with a metal extender and even briefly considered buying an entirely new fight stick. More buying, more modifications, more gibberish, all of it stowed away in the corner, collecting dust. Cora understood none of it, and if you didn't either, you're not alone, even if you are. If we're cooped up in this place, at least we can play the games we want to play, Edmund said. We? I could have bought the single-player stick and saved $1, but why play alone? He turned and gently ushered her by his side in front of the Player 2 controls. Imagine busting this out at a party. What strangers would come to this place? I know we can't do things now, but I don't want to go on hoping for better things, hoping that the next game on the next console will be better. Why do that when we can play the games we lost when things were better? Pulling Cora close, they made a subtle sway in their embrace. He kissed the top of her head as she dug her ear into his chest. Her eyes were closed, and for a moment she stopped listening. We can play together, you and me. Cora cared little for video games and was a near invalid with a controller. She played with her Ponson on occasion, only to be with him. But he did care. He took the games he played and how he played them personally. And when he lost, he became a loser, just to press that personal imprint into being. His previous forays into competitive gaming proved to be a lone man's attempt at self-flagellation. The yearning to play was a yearning to win the way he never could in the arcades. But in joining the fray came the subsequent defeats. He blamed Russ, but it gradually grew to frustration and rage. It got so bad that Cora would leave the moment he started playing. She drew towards the sterile distractions while the sounds of expletives and hard thuds grew louder. She tried to calm him, pull him away, tell him to stop doing this to himself. But why not? Why not beat himself if everyone else will? Here, I'll play. Why don't you beat me? Cora would say when he got that way. It's not the same. You're just trying to make me feel better. You don't care about any of this. Sometimes the only way to walk away was to stop caring. It was how most players freed themselves from the games they played. Players in a game were reminded that it is, after all, play. The better play allowed the better player to keep playing. But there was no better player here. Edmund was alone, and those still playing invariably got better, and those that stopped didn't. Edmund did stop playing eventually. In March of this year, the Chicago lockdown went into effect, and soon after, Edmund was let go from Goose Island Brewery, left to forget his coworkers and their games. The playing stopped. The Nintendo Switch pushed to another corner of his office. On the back of the Pandora Box Retro Arcade 11 was a red switch. When flipped, the plastic casing emitted a blue light as the console turned on. After a few loading screens, the user came to a long, scrolling list of games marked with their full name and designated number. There were 3,003 selectable titles, using the Player 1 controls to scroll, search, and navigate through its vast selection. Apart from the occasional series of games being linked together in succession, there was no discernible order by which the games were listed. Sometimes even the series itself were obscurely separated. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and 3 were listed next to each other, but not the first game. It seemed that certain genres were clumped together, but there were enough exceptions to make the rules moot. The titles at times could be obscure, shortened, or just downright wrong. They used the UK moniker Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles for the group's first two beat-em-up games. The classic beat-em-up, based on The Simpsons, appeared on the list as number 1737, entitled Simpsons Bowling. There were numerous versions of the same game as well, with the inclusion of obscure numbers or words like lobster to distinguish them. There were over a dozen versions of Street Fighter II and at least half a dozen versions of Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. On the right side of the screen was a small video display, playing a clip of gameplay from the title selected, though even this was not always accurate. To scroll through this gaming library was like entering a vast record store seemingly left unkept for decades. It was just as fun perusing the disorderly and muddled nature of the list as it was to play. Games like number 2218, entitled Catfishing, were not what you'd think, nor was the game number 2380, entitled World of Warcraft. Then there were titles Edmund had never heard of before, let alone played, like number 2468, Macho Mouse, or number 1735, Trio, The Punch, Never Forget Me. But for now, Edmund wanted to return back to the beginning, where it all started. Not to the first game listed, however, which, strangely enough, was the King of Fighters 97. Now, after a bit of strolling, he reached game number 121 on the list, simply titled Street Fighter. Edmund had played Street Fighter II in its many, many iterations, but as is so often forgotten, this game, along with its legacy, was in fact a sequel. Edmund had never played the original Street Fighter, and for much of his childhood barely knew it existed. Pressing the Player 1 button, the game's opening screen depicted a brick wall with a company name Capcom spray-painted in green lettering. An unnamed character proceeded to punch a hole through the logo, revealing themselves from the other side. Then came the title screen, and a prompt for credits. Pressing the Player 1 button again brought Edmund to the Course Select screen, displaying the national flags of Japan, USA, China, and England. As the precursor to the classic fighting game format, Street Fighter had no character select screen. The player was stuck using the sole protagonist Ryu, in a single-player gauntlet against characters much less memorable as its sequel's offerings. Rudimentary was the word, encapsulating the gameplay from the moment Edmund selected the USA flag and proceeded to a pitch-black versus screen featuring digital portraits of two unrecognizable combatants. Ryu, strangely enough, appeared with a mop of fiery red hair and white headband rather than the brown hair and red headband synonymous with the character. His opponent, Joe, was a blonde, decidedly indistinct presence wearing long red pants, no shirt, a black buckled belt, and gray shoes. Based in a train yard, Joe's stage was an ugly expanse of musty browns with more indistinct blacks and grays filling in the details. The sky above was a mass of dreary clouds scrolling with regular pace to the left, with a rough rendering of the New York skyline in the distance. The only splash of color was of an American flag rendered on a nearby train car in graffiti, along with the word "funky" printed in puke yellow. The first round commenced, and immediately Edmund was perplexed. All thoughts of how Street Fighter II played, or any subsequent fighting game worth their salt, fell away. The basic principles and goals were there. Two figures rendered in blocky graphical forms moved to and fro on a flat 2D surface trying to beat each other. But the feeling was all wrong. The gameplay was slow, choppy, and delayed, making reactions impossible. A player's control felt more like fruitlessly nabbing at a pile of dolls with a claw. It was as though the game itself was thinking rather than functioning in the mindless zone of thoughtless precision. It was a frenzy of button mashing as Joe landed strikes, seemingly by accident, while Edmund whiffed no matter how hard he tried. This dreadful experience had all the makings of an early prototype. Street Fighter crawled so that Street Fighter 2 could walk, run, and with enough runway, fly before shooting past the atmosphere into the abyss like some wayward rocket. Edmund could shoot nothing, not Hadouken, Shoryuken, or the like. He knew Ryu's moves, they were as fundamental to fighting games as the character himself, but nothing happened. He lost the first round and soon the second. Enemy won the fight over Ryu. God damn, that sucked, Edmund said. You bought this thing to play this? I think your old games were better. I just need to figure it out. Edmund smacked the player 1 button again on the continue screen. Go easy, please. I have dinner in the oven. I don't want you to get... Cora, please. Let me play. Cora's eyes tightened. She looked away, finally, from that ugly gleam on the screen. She wanted to go, leave, and be done with this wretched Halloween. On the floor was a jumble of items cleared from Edmund's desk. Some wires, a notepad, and the like. A photo strip printed in black and white caught Cora's eye. Picking it up brought upon the reflections from another time. There had been a line at the photo booth at the local Empty Bottle, a dive bar regarded for its dingy venue and intimate stage. There, a range of musical acts performed intimate sets to massless crowds. It had been a Tuesday date night for Cora and Edmund, when the $10 cover at the door was waved. There was no memory of who they saw, what they drank, or why they went in the first place. None of it mattered. When the couple entered the photo booth, they didn't know what they would do. There was a subtle anxiety, an assured buzz, and simple elation. The camera started rolling as they moved from genuine smiles to genuine kisses with each snap. Their range of poses were unimaginative, to be sure, but they captured something there. They were in love. Fuck the poses. On the strip was a content, joyful partnership in motion, moving well beyond the bounds of its frame. Cora studied it, the sound of a joystick clicking behind her. They did try again, didn't they? He came around and begged for another chance. No more games. For their next date, Edmund rented a car and drove them out to the Chicago Botanical Garden. Cora had mentioned it when they first met. There, they walked along the garden paths and through the rows of different-colored cauliflower. They sat on marble benches overlooking the lake, went through the southern prairies, and crossed through closed-off paths on the evening island. And when the light began to fade, they drove home together, picking up burgers from Red Hot Ranch on the way back. To think she only said yes to get some dick. There was no thought of being together, much less surviving a global pandemic together. None of that. But it came and went just the same. How did this come to be? How did this come to pass? What mask had they put on to cover those genuine smiles? I'm going to work soon. I'll set the table. You're welcome to join if you want food or care to say goodbye. Cora closed the door and ignored Edmund's half-assed response. It didn't matter. He was still playing. Her mind refocused as it was when she was alone. She passed the office door several times, moving from the kitchen to the dining room. She cleared the table, taking the trick-or-treatment mug to the pantry. She set a platter of harvest hash made with sweet potatoes, Brussels sprouts, pecans, and bacon. She poured a single can of Le Tub into 2 small snifters, placing them beside their plates. Cora took her seat at the end of the table. Connecting to a Bluetooth speaker, she selected an album from her Spotify and played it from the beginning. It was Special Herbs Volume 1 by artist MF Doom, a compilation of hip-hop samples beginning with the first track, Saffron. The clock read 6:10. In less than 2 hours, she would catch a bus downtown. She sat alone, listening to the song's beat and samples. You must understand. The experiments we've been conducting here are against our will. Edmund approached the table curiously, making for a meek, repentant disciple as he locked eyes with Cora. With the look reciprocated, he took a seat. Did you figure it out? Cora asked. Figured out how shit the game is. I'm sorry for you, Panzone. I couldn't perform a fucking move. Not one. Are you sure it's not broken? It's an arcade game. They're not like games today. They tried to break you back then, make you cough up coins and send you on your way. Is that what you wanted? I wanted to play the shit from when I was a kid. I couldn't do that with those newer games. It's not the same. Games today are just money grubbing. Cora's eyes glazed as Edmund continued. She heard this rant before, ones like it. He bemoaned the gaming industry, how it had become a soulless and corporate abyss only interested in profits. He had truly become scorned, as though the industry had scarred his perception of playing. And she both understood that perception and didn't. She could only be sure that she would hear about it again and again. But you said yourself, arcades tried to take your coins. Maybe it was always that way. Well, now I have them all. I don't have to be goaded into giving in anymore. I own them now. I can play for as long as I want. No more coins. You make no sense, Panzone. Games were just better back then. I mean, like, graphics were worse and there wasn't much to do, but they had a feeling. It's something nobody can recreate anymore. I guess they just meant more to you back then, if that's possible. They meant more because you never got to play everything. Today, a kid can see or buy any game online. Arcades, they were dead and dying when I was growing up. They weren't retro, just obsolete. If you were like me and you got one console, you played what was available. But it was a new world for me, one that I never fully explored. But it made an impression. I remember my cousin, Jorge, owned a PlayStation and got me into fighting games. We called him Hamburger. He had Street Fighter Alpha, Bloody Roar, Tekken. We played all night. Was Hamburger's favorite food hamburgers? No, pizza. But that's where the arcades were too. You go to some random pizza joint or a rinky-dink roller skate rink, and there'd be an arcade cabinet of Killer Instinct or MK4. They were cool just to look at, like a monolith to your childhood. Sometimes I didn't even have coins, I just watched the opening. Imagine if you had roller skated. It was like discovering nostalgia, and for the time you played, it was yours. I don't think that's how nostalgia works, Panzone. As Edmund chewed, he noticed a splotch on his shirt. Pausing a moment, he wiped himself down with a napkin. It works when you realize everything today comes off like shit. It works when people would rather remember how things were before, rather than think about what's going to happen. Cora nodded a moment in cold silence. We're just here, Edmund. That's what I'm thinking about. Yeah, well, I was talking about the games, you know. I know. She watched her Panzone grab an ice cube from his glass and proceeded to rub it into the stain. The track Arrowroot began with a looping jazz sample. So, what did you do today? Edmund asked. Cora's face remained featureless. It irked her whenever Panzone rattled off to himself, only to stop a moment and placate her with small talk. It was less genuine interest and more of a courtesy given to a seatmate on a plane or an Uber driver. She knew he didn't care, so why should she? I stayed home, same as always. It's Halloween. Your friends didn't want to party? They're afraid to get sick. I thought being afraid was the point. You didn't dress up? I'm in my nurse scrubs, the costume I've been wearing this whole fucking year. The track Zadar began with a strange rewinding skip. The ice cube was melting fast. Edmund shuffled about, puzzled, before plopping it into his napkin. I'm sorry, did I piss you off? I don't know where to go with this. You're right, everything has come off like shit. This Halloween is shit. But I don't want to spend these last hours talking about it. I understand. Just try and have some normalcy. Is that what this is? By what? Playing games? Straightening up, Edmund clumped up his wet napkin. There was a long pause before the track Fenu Greek began with its frenetic, repeating beat. Finally, Cora leaned towards the witch's kettle of candy and got 2 Reese's mini cups, handing one to her Panzone. I'm sorry. I guess I'm already in work mode. I'm tired, and I don't want to go. Call in. Say you got an upset stomach or something. We can play some games and watch a horror movie. Edmund locked eyes with her again. No, I know you can't, but I know how much Halloween means to you. I don't want you to have to go. I'm essential, they say. These days, it's best to stay that way. I tried texting you last night. Everything all right? Oh, I was busy. Carried a baby through the hospital. You with a baby? We shared wine less than the old men. I almost threw up. It was expired. Expired? Like a carton of milk? It was dead. A clinical term used in nursing. She spent so much time at work now the lingo began to bleed into the outside world. I had to take it down to the morgue, but they were running out of room. My gosh, you okay? I didn't know where to take it. Cora dropped the bit of orange foil onto her plate. What happened? I never asked. The track sumac berries began to play. Cora leaned towards the witch's kettle again, sifting through the pile of candy. Never did. Cora found herself as she was, moving back and forth past her Bonson's office door. Inside, he was playing the Pandora Box Retro Arcade 11. On screen was the opening to X-Men vs. Street Fighter, appearing as number 58 on the list, and curiously, number 164 entitled X-Men vs. SF. One look at the title, showing Ryu and Cyclops shaking hands, made Edmund euphoric. The sensation in discovering this game was one he could never truly experience again. To him, finding this arcade cabinet was like discovering the trappings of self-induced ejaculation. Pathetic, yes, but undeniably visceral. X-Men vs. Street Fighter was a decidedly more frenetic experience than Street Fighter II, and especially Street Fighter. The game offered a tag team experience where players selected 2 characters from a roster of 16, 8 from the X-Men series and 8 from Street Fighter. For his team, Edmund selected Chun-Li and the Juggernaut, entering the game's arcade mode. The screen oozed with energy and vibrancy as the match commenced. Edmund opened with the Juggernaut, a massive powerhouse with devastating offense. Admittedly, he knew little of his moveset, but the first match was a breeze. It was nearing 8 p.m. as the office door opened, with Cora's eyes peering in. I have to go. I put the food away if you still want some. Don't fret over the dishes. I'll do them. I know. You don't have to. I'll see you tomorrow. Want to play with me? I don't know if there's time for that, Ponson. Besides, I'm not going to be much fun anymore. Don't say that. Why can't we play? Maybe we don't want to. I want to. I know you do. I'll get you an Uber downtown. I'll do whatever you want. Please, come here. Cora didn't know what to say, still standing outside the doorway. She didn't believe him, but what did she believe? She could answer that, though not all thoughts were made for words. Soon, she would let her thoughts fade away with nothing to say. It was time for work, and maybe play? Edmund reset the game and drew close with an embrace. With his guidance, she familiarized herself with the joystick and buttons. They kissed, reaching the character select screen. Hit the button, Edmund said. I did. Tapping the player 2 button repeatedly to no avail. Edmund reached over and repeated the action. He tapped the player 2 start button and then mashed them all. By now, player 1 had auto-selected characters. Maybe I have to enter when I'm playing, Edmund said. As the first match started, he again pressed the player 2 button with no result. Guess I can't play. Maybe I have to hit the player 2 button first. Edmund reset the game, mashing the player 2 button again on the title screen. It did nothing. What the hell? Maybe this version of the game is whack. Let's try another one. Back at the game list, Edmund selected number 57, X-Men Children of the Atom, only to run into the same problem. He went into number 106, Super Street Fighter II Turbo, and again had no response. On a whim, he went to the Simpsons arcade game, which for some special cabinets even allowed for 4 players. Still, there was nothing. On the back of the Pandora Box Retro Arcade 11 was a minuscule button marked with the letters CFG. Pressing this transferred Edmund to a system settings screen, allowing the user to configure sound, button scheme, video display, and so on. He selected a tab labeled 10 Test, bringing him to a digital display of both players' button layout. It was designed to test the functionality of each control input, as pressing any button or direction on the joystick would be indicated by the digital display along with a ding sound. Of course, if ding sprung as Edmund fiddled the player 1 inputs with everyone functioning properly. Then, as he repeated this for the player 2 inputs, his fears were confirmed. Nothing. Not a sound. It's not the games that's fucked, it's the controls. He tinkered fruitlessly through the system, settings, and even a factory reset didn't fix it. Does this come with instructions? Cora said, sifting through the box. I don't know, Cora. I didn't buy it to read. There's a tech support number on the box. Want to call them? It also says reliability quality, so you know that's bullshit. Maybe they can fix it. You think anyone would pick up at this hour? It's from China, right? That would make it like morning right now. No more games, Cora! Edmund waved off her remark and plopped into his chair. What do you mean? This is a game, isn't it? Cora's demeanor softened. If there's no fixing it, then at least message the seller. Maybe you can get a refund. Where'd you buy it from? I got it from some Chinese dude off of eBay. The seller's username was Etheus13, apparently located in Hong Kong. Established this year, the account garnered a 98.4% positive feedback rating from over 100 buyers. The purchase, made on October 24th while Edmund was at work, came with a price of $92.90, plus $5.81 for tax and free shipping. The product shipped the following day and arrived exactly 7 days later. As Edmund sulked and stewed at the controls, Cora was able to pull up his account under the username HondoHandSlaps30. She sent a message to Etheus13 relaying the problem while proposing a return. We'll see what he says. Please, try to work with them, Cora said. I have to go. Edmund's head hung low, gazing down at his crotch. There's no point. No point in what? No point in our doing those things. I'm trying to make this better, Ponson. Please, don't be broken up by this. Oh, I'm broken, all right. This whole year has broken me up. You can still play. You know you will. Maybe someone's playing with me. No one else cares, Ponson. Only I do. Why can't I have this? I paid my dues. Shit, I used the last of my stimulus check for this. All I wanted was to play. I know. No one is trying to stop you. Let's just wait and see. Edmund's head shot up, lips pouting. Why bother? They already have my money. Why bother telling me anything? They couldn't even be bothered to warn us about COVID. I didn't think you'd resort to Trump rhetoric as an argument. I'm not arguing. Just being terse, and I'm not in the mood to agree with you. Shaking her head, Cora made towards the door. I can't stop you from being like this, all doom and gloom. I'll see you tomorrow. Cora stopped, observing Edmund sulking in his office chair. His hands formed a mask over his face, a sad sack with sullied scents. Cora crouched beside him, caressing his shoulders. Tell me why you're mad. You're a good girl. But this is beating me. We can buy another one. Why must this continue? Why do I always get beat? Well, someone has to. At least you're someone. Someone I love. Very much. Yeah, that's me, all right. Another lovesick chump to squeeze more coins out of. Edmund, please. What can I do to make this better? What do you want? I want to break something. Cora laid her head on his shoulder, feeling his muscles tighten. It doesn't have to be this way. And it won't be forever. Who's to say it can't be fixed? It's only a game. A swell of rage erupted as Edmund rose from the office chair. Don't. Cora said with eyes closed. In a slew of expletives, the office door swung open. A hard whack reverberated the adjoining wall. It's only a game, Cora said, opening her weary eyes. Edmund stormed to the kitchen, hands clenched at the edge of the sink full of dishes, eyes closed, teeth firmly tightened as he tried busting a blood vessel. There's no winning. No way out of this. No way to stop it. You lose. Continue? Then came a shuddered gasp, followed by a deep exhale. The sound of breath went silent. The pantry door opened, and Edmund took the trick-or-treatment mug to the sink. Taking a slow, deliberate swig of tap water, he heard Cora step out from the office. "Oh, God!" Cora exclaimed before entering the kitchen with a look of incredulity. "Why did you do that?" "I was thirsty. I told you I'd do the dishes." "You think I'm playing?" Cora staring daggers at him before storming off. Edmund followed. Cora stood near the office door, pointing at the damage. On the painted drywall was a fist-sized indentation, resulting in a partial hole. "Why can't you control yourself? Why must you break things?" "At least it's something I can fix. This home is all we have, and I spend my day making sure it's ready for you when you get back. And for what? So you can watch and throw tantrums over some fucking games? But you can't always win because you blew money on broken crap? It's pathetic. It's not just a game. It's everything. I don't want to hear it. Nothing." She rubbed her eyebrows and released a deep exhalation of her own. "Break what you want. Seethe over bullshit. I'm done trying to stop you." "Please, Seguro. What can I do to fix it?" Edmund pleaded sheepishly. "Nothing." Cora wiped her eyes. "I don't know what to say." Grabbing her bag and keys, she made for the front door. "I don't know why I'm like this." "It's what you do. I can't keep asking why. I didn't want it to end this way, but it did." Cora nodded bitterly and walked out the door. The city streets were empty. The fussy habitations of the neighborhood appeared hollow, like the womb of an aborted fetus. The fall breeze greeted her on the porch. There was something old and forgotten on that Halloween night, like she was strolling through a memory of things that could no longer be. Childhood candy eaten too fast, kisses from meek lips tasting of hams and cigarettes, songs from dead musicians, all gone as they were. Cora gently nuzzled her earbuds in and connected to Spotify. The playlist continued with instrumentals from Special Herbs, Volume 5. The last minutes of the track, White Willow Bark, repeated the same upbeat rhythms and samples with smooth vibrancy. With heavy steps, Cora swayed back and forth down the porch and across the yard. The front gate reverberated shut, and her path went north up Damon Avenue. The track Orange Blossoms opened with a short sample of Paul Horn's High Tide, with the suspenseful shrill of a flute answered by a haunting hum. Walking to the eerie instrumental, Cora closed her weary eyes a moment and imagined being at the hospital. Standing in the ICU, she could see herself wearing her Halloween nurse's costume complete with the Red Cross nurse's cap. In her hand was a plunged hypodermic needle. Sitting in a wheelchair directly in front of her was the bundled, neutered figure of her grandmother Seguro, her namesake. The planes of memory and imagination melded into one. As a child, Cora's mother often left her in the care of her grandmother, becoming a parental figure in place of lesser ones. Reaching late adolescence, their roles had reversed as Cora took to nursing her ailing caretaker, helping her in the bathroom, tracking her medications, and maintaining her home. Their time together became something of a professional inspiration for Cora. But her grandmother Seguro was more than that. A true friend, one of the few people she truly loved. She died earlier this year in a nursing home outbreak. Due to lockdown restrictions, Cora never got to see her before the end. When Cora asked her mother how she died, she simply replied COVID, as though it had become a kind of catch-all statement for the end. And in many ways it was. Cora had become estranged from her mother and hadn't spoken to her since. What else was there to say? She was gone. Though standing before her grandmother Socorro now, Cora felt compelled to say anything. But there was no recognition in her gaze. How could she, when Cora was still wearing her surgical mask? Even her name tag was no help. She didn't know a Cora. The need for recognition and love welled up until it reached those weary eyes. Cora opened them, feeling the heaviness of her moist eyelids. Saying nothing, she reached the corner of Chicago and Damon and continued east, past the Chicago Cleaners and Shoe Repair, to the corner bus stop on Chicago and Walcott. From there, she caught a bus carrying her past the Kennedy Expressway, past the North Branch Chicago River, and nearly reaching the Windy City machinations of Lake Michigan itself. A final stop brought her to the precipice of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, a spot she had come to call the end of the line. Back on the porch, the flame gleamed from the end of a long Bic lighter used for grills and candles. Edmund held it to his face, trying to light the butt end of Cora's used cigarettes. A humble pocket of useless smoke remained, offering little more than a few puffs. The nicotine finished with an aftertaste of burning paper, and he could feel his nose hairs searing. He sat on the edge of the balcony, with the plastic jack-o'-lantern of candy beside him, the cash butts tossed back in the ashtray along with some discarded candy wrappers. The light from the porch went out. Edmund sat unmoved in darkness. There was nostalgia in the air, things seemingly forgotten if they weren't still unfolding in his mind. He could lose himself somewhere. It would be in the Pandora Box Retro Arcade 11. He thought of game number 108, entitled Red Earth, a fighting game which incorporated fantasy RPG elements. Beyond this, Edmund knew nothing, and he'd been meaning to try it. But once that box was opened, it would remain so until he could take no more. And to that devoid end, he did not know. Edmund's phone illuminated, receiving an email from an address linked to eBay. But it went unopened. The porch light came on as he rose and noticed the tote bag stowed away in the corner. Back inside, Edmund munched on a crunchy Butterfinger bite and put the wrapper back into the jack-o'-lantern. He was sitting cross-legged in the hallway, surveying the punched indention at eye level. From the tote bag, he removed a 1/2 pint of lightweight spackling and a plastic paint scraper. Thankfully, the damage was not irreparable. By carefully pulling the drywall back in place, he was able to bind it with a healthy layer of spackling. Scraping the excess material away, he felt less like a handyman and more a child playing with dried Play-Doh. Still, the patch held. With another layer applied, a bit of sanding and fresh paint, it could be fixed, almost like it never happened. But it had. Rising to survey his work, Edmund couldn't help but gape towards his office. The thought of playing pulled at him as he tried opening a Snickers without contaminating it with his spackled fingertips. The perfect fighting game for this hollowed night came to him. Darkstalkers, the Night Warriors, appeared as number 167 and also number 72 as Vampire, the Night Warriors. It was a fighting game with a character roster inspired by the universal horror monsters of the 1930s. Players could fight as legally distinct iterations of Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, and so on. The theme's cliches were bolstered by its unique, vibrant art style, one Cora would have appreciated. Even now, Edmund was mad at himself for not thinking of it when she was here. But it didn't matter now. Dirty dishes soaked in a sink of hot water and detergent. A sponge sat in a shallow tray of sanitizer. The faucet dangled over the adjoining sink, the hot water running. When the dishes had soaked long enough, Edmund went to work. Every dish, cup, and utensil was scrubbed with a layer of suds, rinsed, and placed on the dish rack. Edmund used to lament his mother for making him wash dishes. "But you're so good at it," she would say. And he did take to the task meticulously the way he did with nothing else. It was a meditative respite for him, a way of doing good that he could honestly ascertain. Honest work for the honest fuck-up, taking it with a process and a song in his heart. He mouthed the lyrics of something stuck in his head. Lines punctuated the word Doomsday. Another email notification appeared on Edmund's phone. He dried his hands of soap and suds before grabbing the trigger treatment mug. But he stopped, just before dunking it in the water. The sound of running water went off, observing it in silence. It was broken. Edmund suddenly recalled his childhood high chair. It was later passed down to his younger siblings, remaining a totem to his formative years at the end of his mother's dinner table. Edmund could remember the outline of the dining room, but nothing more. It was the gloomy end of summer, a day which wrought the darker hues of an early fall. The room was dimly lit, and the tension seemed to be settling in the midday sun. Someone was in trouble. Placed on the tray was a toy belonging to his cousin Hamburger. It was a collectible bought by Edmund's mother for his 6th birthday. Though part of a Street Fighter toy line, the figurine was one little Edmund had never seen before, modeled after Street Fighter III's new lead protagonist, Alex. Created as a departure from the humble, quiet, and distinctly Japanese Ryu, Alex was a homegrown appeal to the West. Billed as an American pro wrestler, Alex bore more than a few similarities to the true blue American Hulk Hogan, with long, blonde hair tied in a ponytail and a red bandana. His attire presented a curious mix of part military garb, part workman's trousers. Shirtless, he wore fingerless gloves, combat boots, and unbuttoned overalls which dangled dangerously low to perfectly present his chiseled form with provocative and strangely homoerotic tones. It was in this curious and impractical attire where the damage was made plain. Even now, Edmund could still smell the faint hints of hot glue, a glob of which was slowly drying, holding Alex's front end of the trousers back to his person. Approaching the high chair, only the top half of little Edmund's face perched over the protruding tray. Of the figure's gaming origins he knew nothing, but this did not cease his insatiable appetite to know. He wanted to hold it in his hands. He wanted to play, but playtime was over. "Get away from it, Edmund. It's not yours," Edmund's mother hollered. She was on her knees, attempting to console a sobbing Hamburger with an assured embrace. "Why?" Hamburger managed, smothering his red face into his hand. "Lo siento, Jorge. We'll fix it. We'll buy you another." "Or did he break it?" Edmund's mother rested her chin on his head and turned to look back at Edmund. "He's what he does. He's just a child. He can't help himself." Inside his office, Edmund jostled with the Player 1 controls of the Pandora Box Retro Arcade 11. He was playing number 98 on the list, the third iteration of the Street Fighter III sequel entitled Street Fighter III Third Strike. Even at first glance, the game was a timeless gem of colors, graphics, and feel, the peak of what was possible in a 2D fighting game from the masters of the genre. The most notable and controversial change made in Street Fighter III came in the character roster. Like the introduction of Alex, nearly all of the characters were original to this game. Noe Honda, Dalsum, Blanca, and so on. Only a select few from the prior games were present, and it would be no surprise that the first female of fighting games was one of them. Edmund's third opponent would be Chun-Li, appearing in her classic attire. A red streak splashed across the word "fight," and the match commenced. The difficulty spiked, with Edmund barely able to get Chun-Li's life bar halfway before being beaten. The second round fared little better. Alex was sent careening to the ground as the phrase "KO" appeared in yellow. "You lose." Edmund watched as Chun-Li gave her signature peace sign in victory. "Continue?" The game counted down from 10, prompting a press of the Player 1 button to try again. But he hesitated. Looking over at his phone, placed next to him at his desk. "You're still playing?" A poignant question, but a self-evident one. Hitting the Player 1 button, Edmund watched the match begin again, with Alex doing the Hulk Hogan shirt rip. This time, however, Edmund let go of the controls, leaving Alex standing still. Chun-Li moved back and forth, jumping sporadically and landing the occasional strike. After a period of no resistance, Chun-Li eventually won, with an awarded perfect for taking no damage. All the while, Edmund watched in detached ease. He knew what would happen, but felt no sting from failing to stop it. The second round went the same way, with Chun-Li winning again. "Continue?" It counted down before finally reaching 0. Game over. Finally, Edmund opened the email on his phone. Expecting an automated message from eBay, he was surprised to have received two messages from Etheus13. Two small paragraphs culminating in a single letter that, while not well written, contained a genuine attempt at helpfulness. Dear Hundo Hand Slaps 30, sorry to hear of your dissatisfaction with the product. It may be some connection inside loose in the transit. We sent this instructional video showing how to fix the problem. Would you please kindly refer to it and have a try? If you still have problem, send some pics showing the inside. Then we will check for you. Any update, feel free to contact us here. Best regards. Included was a YouTube link leading to an instructional video. Even with a language barrier, the process was fairly simple. The off-screen instructor gently removed 3 screws from the Pandora Box Retro Arcade 11, allowing them to lift the control panel and peer at the machine's inner hardware. They then replugged every cable linked to the buttons and joystick before screwing the board back together. Scavenging the tote bag again, Edmund found his multi-tool screwdriver. He followed the instructions exactly, careful not to strip the screws or touch any other bits. Flipping the switch, the panel lit up again in blue. He returned to the Street Fighter III Third Strike title screen and hit the Player 2 button. Sure enough, it worked. The Player 2 joystick and all its buttons functioned perfectly. Yeah, that makes sense, Edmund said. They were the first words spoken in hours, cutting the silence like a knife with their uncomfortable summation. Jumping to the Player 1 controls, Edmund joined Player 2 on the character select screen and chose Alex. With the Player 2 controls, he selected Chun-Li. As the player versus player match commenced, Edmund once again removed his hands from both controls. Watching it unfold, Edmund unwrapped a Milky Way and lobbed it into his maw. Both combatants stood still in symmetrical positions at center stage, the vibrant graphics and energetic rapidity of the music juxtaposed with the stillness. There was no clicking from joysticks, no mashing buttons. The combatants did nothing. Their gentle gyrations formed a connecting pulse between them. For every pulse, there was a second, with a match timer counting down from 99, slowly reaching 0. Timeout flashed across the screen in turquoise lettering. The general rule for a timeout was that the player who took the least damage would be deemed the winner. In a rather rare circumstance such as this, a previously unseen animation commenced. Judgment appeared in the same turquoise lettering, along with 3 women positioned between the combatants. Their look and attires were decidedly distinct, presenting ethnic characterizations similar to those seen in the It's a Small World Disney ride. They would be the judges of the match. One after another, they held up cards featuring a portrait of the winner. A dark-haired woman dressed in traditional Indian attire along with a bindi mark on her forehead held up a portrait of Alex. A blonde woman dressed in heavy winter clothes found in Eastern Europe held up a portrait of Chun-Li. A darker-skinned woman dressed in roller skater gear along with a long t-shirt and baseball cap raised another for Chun-Li, making her the winner. Perfect. How such judgments were formulated remained a meaningless mystery. The desire to win and the incredulity of defeat was never more meaningless in this context. That incredulous rage was little more of a regrettable memory. The second round commenced, but Edmund felt no inclination to stop this. He wanted to see what would happen. However, before the timer reached 0, the game stopped. After long periods of inactivity, the system would return to the list of titles. It was as though the Pandora Box Retro Arcade 11 was telling him, that's not how the game is played. Scanning over the lists, Edmund pondered the reasoning behind his inaction. He grew tired of losing, yes, but this felt different. Digressing somewhat, he considered why he ever stopped playing games at all. He remembered gaming even into college, but played them less and less over the years. Entering a post-college world of disheartening happenstance, he wanted a job more than he wanted to play. He went broke more than once and found other ways to cope than gaming. He made friends, avoided much of anyone else, and seemingly in the pit of loneliness, he found Cora. Happenstance from a lot of happenings. That's what the arcade experience used to be like. Find a random arcade stowed away in the movie theater or Walmart Center and see a cabinet of Carnival or MK3 transfix you like the attractive eyes of someone. Simply drop a few quarters in and play it as it lays. But when did the play stop? An easy summation was that he grew up, but he could not ignore the lost childhood still dominating his mind. But when he was a child, he never had to stop. Someone or something would invariably strike the clock at midnight. But standing there now, watching as that hour neared, he was alone, with nothing to stop him. But did he want to stop playing? Edmund stepped back from the Pandora Box Retro Arcade 11 as though he were allowing another child their turn. Watching the play unfold was what he always liked to do in the arcades. The state of winning or losing never lasted long. But to play audience to that scene, with a cast of uncouth kids playing their roles with glee, when time stopped and the opening screens went on, you came through to dig the sound, find a cabinet, and crowd around. For that moment, you felt both energized and at ease, the ease of just letting things play out. But in quarantine, letting things play out felt as dreadful as playing not to lose. Edmund broke from his musings, returning back to that list of titles. After a few seconds, the Pandora Box Retro Arcade 11 would automatically scroll down, making its slow tick down the list like a timer. By now, it was on number 8. The King of Fighters 2003, and it would assuredly continue, going down one after another through all 3003 selectable titles, and beyond that, who could know? In that instant, Edmund wasn't sure what he knew. It was here where the pitiable perceptions of loss and gain found themselves muddled in a waning past. If one could only forget what all the losses were, if one could only remember what all the wins weren't. He felt more like that lone child playing with his broken toys. But he wasn't alone, and he wasn't a child anymore. Edmund the man knew something that his childhood self did not. He knew what playing meant. Nothing. Yet there he was, selecting a game and hitting the player 1 button again. He kept on playing. Why? Cora would ask. Why not? In the beginning hours of November, the blue gleam from the Pandora Box Retro Arcade 11 finally went out. Edmund spent hours playing games like number 23, Garou Mark of the Wolves, number 102, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, number 164, Violence Fight, and so on. He never replied to Etheus13 about fixing the player 2 controls. He never messaged Cora about fixing the hole in the wall. The lights from the dining room, kitchen, and office went out. The door entering their dark bedroom opened, with Edmund making small piles of removed clothing before nestling into the left side of the bed. Edmund found his comfort spot facing the empty space next to him, still feeling the irritated glaze in his sight from long periods without blinking. Placed beside him was the plastic jack-o'-lantern filled with candy wrappers. The room was much colder than the rest of the house, and he could feel the faint beginnings of a long and arduous winter. A white gleam emanated from his phone as Edmund fingered through his web browser to a bookmarked page. This led him to the OnlyFans sign-in, where he logged in under the username LightningKicks55. Edmund's foray into OnlyFans began when he found himself scrolling through the Instagram profiles featuring women strutting in sensual video game cosplay. Their profiles included links for a free month subscription to their pages. All you needed was a profile name and a verified bank account to watch someone posing in their bedroom dressed as Poison from Final Fight. Just create an account, verify a debit card, drop a few coins in, and play along. Where was the rub in all this, besides the obvious one? In a time teeming with free porn, organized in lists that would put the Pandora Box Retro Arcade 11 to shame, perhaps it was the personal tribute of paying to play, of putting your money where your mouth was, so to speak. It was a slew of fair-weather flirts vying endlessly for your attention while feigning the barest minimum of personal intimacy. It was merely on you to figure which one caught your eye. Like games, Edmund couldn't seem to quit OnlyFans, sometimes deleting it only to create a new one. But he never figured it would hit home as it did. On a whim, he'd search for a particular name. After several fruitless attempts, he tried her full name and was dumbstruck to see an image of Cora lying on her side in red lingerie. Without her knowledge, Edmund subscribed to Nurse Seguro 3 for months, becoming a regular tipper as he did this morning. Apart from the obvious outing of his own account, the reasoning behind his covert support remained a mystery, even to him. There it was, though. In his message box, Edmund opened the image received from Nurse Seguro 3, complete with a prompt to donate more. Thumbing open the chat box, he began to stroke himself, eyes transfixed on the text. His mind raced for a response, searching for sense in words that were not there. You win. I lose. Let it go. Let it be. I love you. His hand remained clenched around Cora's image, holding on desperately as though it were a melting ice cube. Every detail, every word given entranced him. She was his prophet, and he, a disciple devoted to her with biblical exuberance. Heeding her prompt, he prepared a tip to the amount of $30. With it, he included a message, a question born more out of desperation than curiosity. Who broke the cup? Edmund wrote. As he reached the peak of his yearning, he hit send. Then the screen went dark, the image gone, and as things came down, the room's emptiness grew ever present. Edmund was alone, left to his own questions. What would she look like? What would she say? Would she even respond? Edmund, waiting for answers, faded into sleep. In his dreams, he thought of the kissing games they used to play, the way Cora's eyelids flickered when their lips touched, the way they went back and forth, mirroring each other's kisses in length and touch. Play in its purest form. When did the play end? Edmund did not know. Suddenly, he found himself in front of an arcade cabinet for Super Street Fighter II Turbo. There, the character E Honda stood alone in the circle of his sumo-inspired stage. Facing to the right, he crouched in his classic stance, poised to strike with vicious abandonment, ready to break anyone and anything. But there was nobody to fight, no opponent, and nobody playing. Was it broken? Edmund watched the match timer count down, wondering what would happen when it reached 0. Embodied in the bitter ease of detachment, he got a sobering sense that someday he'll wake up and just won't feel like playing anymore. The lamps gleamed like a long glowing filament down Chicago Avenue, while Cora made her trek west from whence she came. At 5:35 in the morning, the last bastions of fall dust remained ever present. A warm exhale blew against her mask and down her lips. With heavy steps, she felt detached from her physical form, recounting happenings from a long Halloween night. Cora always felt that places were defined by the people who inhabited them. When she thought of home, Edmund remained omnipresent. At the Northwestern Hospital, patients left imprints on her memory that, when forgotten, took away a piece of her with them. She could recall a 400-pound black woman suffering mightily from COVID. Wearing a bioprotective suit, Cora attempted to transfer the woman from a stretcher onto a hospital bed. Doing so alone, at 5'1" and weighing less than 120 pounds, she found herself in a desperate tug, as though she were trying to pull her from the precipice. "I'm going to fall," wailed the massive patient. Entering another patient's room, there was an old lady recovering from surgery. Hooked to several IVs, she lay unconscious, mouth slack and eyes shut. As Cora drew near to change the monitor batteries, she felt the eerie presence of confusion returning to consciousness. A voice wailed in a low, defeated whisper. My phone. My phone. My phone. My phone. You're already holding it." The old woman's eyes and mouth remained as they were, a deafening pause that seemed to snuff out all life. "You do it. I'm tired." The patient chatter bore a morbid humor becoming of the circumstance. This grew especially true with old men who, when they were not attempting to match Cora with their grandsons, offered weary wisdom, imprudent as it was astute. She remembered wheeling an old, balding gentleman from his room to be discharged. "The years I spent in marriage, it was like watching paint dry." They rolled past the disheveled woman, looking much older than she was, staring off into space. "It's just not fun anymore. It's all gone with you. It used to be there, but now it's gone." Cora made a left onto Damon Avenue, feeling those patients and her work leave her. She was nowhere, in a place without people. October was gone, and the monsters meant to pervade its night never came. But she still caught herself staring into the emptiness, searching for an unknown to fear. Cora's mind was playing games with her, and she did not want to play along. She imagined herself as a ghost, a stranger treading through her haunted apartment. She was wearing the sexy nurse costume, complete with the Red Cross nurse's cap and the surgical mask. Past her Ponsone's office, the blue gleam from the Pandora Box Retro Arcade 11 still on. Going down the hall, she could see the walls Swiss cheese with hundreds of holes punched into them. In the kitchen, she looked down and saw every piece of glassware shattered into grains on the tiled floor. Reaching the bedroom, she stopped, feeling a somber turmoil brought on by what was known rather than what wasn't. In the bedroom mirror, she could see her Ponzone dreaming. As she gazed deeper into the glass, she could not recognize herself. Her OnlyFans subscribers called her Nurse Seguro 3. Her boyfriend called her Cora. But who was this ghost arriving too late for Halloween? Reaching the front gate, Cora stopped for a moment. Approaching her apartment steps, she caught sight of the garden bed, still empty as it was this morning. Dropping her work bag upon the step, she returned from an unseen corner of the yard with pots of bright orange calendulas. Perched on her knees beside the garden bed, all else fell away. The lost time, her weakening body, and even the absence of the tote bag meant nothing to her now. Cora's hands were dried and cracked from repeated washing and sanitizing, and they burned as she dug them into the soil. She dug deep enough for the roots before gently removing the flowers from their nursery pots. Each one was attended to, their leaves caressed and stems tenderly embraced before planting them into the loving bosom of Mother Earth. She knew they had probably been left in their nursery pots too long, becoming dry and root-bound. But what did that matter now? They were her little patients in desperate need of nursing. With enough love, water, and sunlight, they may grow into happy, fat Ponzones. The coolness of the soil brought Cora memories of her grandmother Seguro's garden. Cora could remember her touch as she worked the earth, firm, strong, with such grace and class. As a child, Cora always loved to help, loved to be a part of a world that made her grandmother so happy. It was a place that made time beautiful, the way seasonal colors changed from green to orange to white. At home, Cora pretended to have her own garden, took to replanting weeds her father had pulled in rows like her grandmother's flowers and herbs. Without seeds, she planted whatever was around, hoping it might grow, like dried flower petals, a dead goldfish, and even her mother's pager. Children will play their games, but it wasn't a game to Cora. She wasn't playing. She was just happy to be by her grandmother Seguro, kneeling before that lush garden. It was everything she ever wanted, all gone as it was. A familiar tune flowed from Cora's lips. It was a song played countless times, too many times, but its presence was like a lost love, bringing a familiar warmth to her pain, feeling every beat to bop to, and every chorus to sing. When I was led to you, I knew you were the one for me. I swear the whole world could. Cora stopped, looking up at the sunrise. The last figments of Halloween dissipated, and it was like observing time leave her behind. The play had overtaken her, but her happiness was gone. And what remained but a child trying to be her grandmother? What was there but a nurse's escort with soiled hands, grass-stained smocks, and a garden of dying little patients? Nothing. Cora sat in silence, finally removing her mask. Playtime was over. No more games, no more tricks, and no more treats. The song was finished. Must the games we play always end this way? Edmund would ask. Seguro? Never did.